I have been trying to do my work as a teacher, so has Natalie. And yesterday, there was actually a blackout at our house. And of course, those blackouts would be due to everybody using their AC because it's hot as hell. The Los Angeles Water Department said that there were blackouts. And yeah, my house was one of the ones to experience it. So I'm going to be talking with Mason, who's actually an environmental scientist. He's a friend from high school. And we'll be talking about a ton of different topics, but specifically climate change and Donald Trump, the EPA, Bolsonaro. I hope you enjoy the video. Ready and go.
Because it's been so hot, basically, everyone's running their air conditioner a lot more, which uses a lot of energy. Like pretty much everyone is using more energy than normal. And so, yeah, like you said, it's like a grid problem. They're they do the rolling blackouts to basically to conserve energy so that it doesn't just get overloaded. I think that well, I don't know the exact cause of the fires. Like the Camp Fire, the most destructive wildfire in California history, was because of PG&E like mismanaging their equipment. And so I know that since then they've had a lot of measures to change the way they're doing things and updating infrastructure, for example. But yeah, I believe the blackouts are just to try to save energy so that we don't just like run out or it doesn't get overloaded.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because we are obviously virtual distance teaching right now, me and Natalie, and she was in the middle of a lesson and the power went out, and so our Wi-Fi gave out, and then she was charging her laptop and it died after like a minute or two,
Oh no.
and so she left her class hanging. But it's interesting how it's like the electricity, like the power affects our education. Like it affects so many different things and like our well-being with AC. It's a lot. And I wanted to ask you, because I know there's been fires up closer to your area. What's it like right now over there?
Yeah, so it's crazy. I know there's a large fire like in the Redding area and as well as Santa Cruz, which I believe is pretty unusual for that area. But then the largest fire that's close to me in Sacramento is the lightning complex fire that is from it starts in Vacaville and wraps around Lake Berryessa, goes all the way to Lake County. So just like for reference for how large this fire is, last year, 2019, was also not a good year for wildfires. There was a total of 200,000 acres that burned. But then this one fire that's in like the Napa region is 130 acres. So that's more than half of what all of the fires were last year in one fire, basically. And so where I am, Sacramento's in a low point in the Central Valley. And so hot air and smoke just kind of gravitate towards this region naturally. Like it was all the smoke and the air quality was really bad during the Camp Fire in 2018 too. But it is just crazy right now. Like outside, it has that apocalyptic look with the sun peeking through, and it looks like, you know, like almost like that red, orange, pink color. And there's ash everywhere. When I went in my car this morning, ash flew everywhere when I opened the door. And the air quality is just really bad. Like I've been avoiding going outside because it just feels bad to breathe the air. Like they say, like, oh, there's a warning for sensitive groups, but I kind of feel like anyone shouldn't really be breathing the air if they can help it. So I've just been hanging inside for the most part.
You mentioned
But
also how it's a threat multiplier. Is that what you called it?
that's right. Yeah, I was just going to tie in something that you were saying earlier. So we have these rolling blackouts that are affecting education, and we're having these blackouts in the first place in part because of climate change. So like sometimes climate change is kind of thought of as like it's its own disaster. Like it's a thing that's separate. Like there's climate change and then there's education problems. But then this is an example of how the issue of climate change is woven into really every challenge that we face. But yeah, that's an example of how education is being affected indirectly by climate change. Mm-hmm. And then another way that another example of how we can see climate change is a climate multiplier here in California. We're currently facing a pandemic, which on its own isn't easy. It's a respiratory illness. And then on top of that, we have these fires that are worse because of climate change, and the air is worse because of climate change too. Like it's dangerous air to breathe, and there's already a respiratory illness pandemic. So that just makes like sensitive groups, it makes things even worse for them. And then also people are having to evacuate their homes, fleeing the fire, and then are placed in shelters where, you know, like people are concerned about COVID spreading there, and you don't really have a choice. Like you're told to stay inside, but then when a fire is approaching your house, obviously you can't. And so you just have like less options, like, and you have to be in these shelters, which can make the spread of COVID even worse. So this is just an example of how there are these problems. You could talk about them being separate, but really the issue of climate change is, we can see it being like it's interwoven into the issue of COVID as well, because it's making it harder for us to survive and stay healthy during a pandemic.
Some questions about the EPA, California. What's going on? Is there some sort of tension right now going on between them?
Yes. So I guess one of the major things that's caused a bit of an uproar lately is that Donald Trump has been attempting to revoke California's ability to set its own air pollution standards. The Clean Air Act, it sets the federal standards for what, like for anywhere in the United States, like the minimal like air quality that is allowed to be, basically. But there's a clause that just says this might be like the baseline conditions of what it needs to be, but the individual states have the rights to set their own standards. And so California historically has been kind of a leader in establishing air quality standards. You can see the pictures like in the 1950s and 60s, like LA used to have really bad smog. There was a lot of people there, and that was kind of a unique issue at the time, just because there's so many concentrated people there. And so Ronald Reagan was the governor at the time, and he established the Air Resources Board. And so when the Clean Air Act was first being established on the federal level, the federal government actually was asking California about their practices of regulating their own air standards, because they were kind of ahead of the curve at the time, having already established those regulations.
Wait, so you're saying a Republican actually wanted to have cleaner air standards?
Yeah, I was surprised when I found that out too. When Ronald Reagan was the governor, he established the Air Resources Board in the 60s.
Did this have to do with I think the Clean Air Act of 1970? I think that also went hand in hand with California wanting to lower emissions as well.
Definitely, yeah. There's a really big push. Like 1970 was a huge year for environmental regulations. Like that was about the time where like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the EPA was just established then, I'm pretty sure. And then also the Endangered Species Act came along a couple years later. During the 60s, there's that was one of the first big environmental movements. And like the establishment of Earth Day was a part of that too. The first Earth Day was in 1970. And so I think on a federal level, there was kind of a recognized for a need to control the environment, or I mean, to control what we do to the environment. Like, I mean, there'd be things like a river would be on fire because there's so many like chemicals in it. And people would saw that and be like, wait a minute, like that just seems so so backwards and just so shockingly bad that we need to have standards for how much rivers can be polluted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was that movement that was pretty critical for getting all these environmental laws established in the first place. But yes, so since going back to your original question, since the 70s, I guess even before that, we've always set our own air standards and kind of been ahead of the curve in that regard. And, like there's certain laws in California, like you have to get a smog check. You don't have to do that everywhere. And so when Trump was trying to take away this right, basically, California took it personal and started a lawsuit. But other states have joined California because other states also set their own air standards that are stricter than the Clean Air Act, which is just kind of the baseline.
And it's like 22 other states, so that's a lot of different states that are actually suing.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you also mentioned like rivers that were on fire due to chemicals, right? And I think there's a similar contamination happening with pesticides, right? And I know California also banned a certain pesticide. What was it called again? It was
That's right. It's called chlorpyrifos.
Okay. And so that's not banned federally. It's just in California right now?
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting because, well, to give some background on this pesticide chlorpyrifos, it has been widely used for a long time, especially in agriculture. But there have been studies lately that have been showing that there's a big association between like the use of that pesticide and then brain damage for developing brains. So like pesticide drips, like near a school, for example, like there'd be cases of children being negatively affected by that. So under Obama's administration, he was initiating this pesticide to be banned on a federal level, but it wasn't finished, it wasn't finalized. And so when Trump took office, he decided not to finalize it, basically. And so it was only last year that the California's EPA decided to put a ban on that. There's a Department of Pesticide Regulation that monitors the pesticides that are used in California and makes policy recommendations too.
Right. And so I don't know if I should put that success onto Governor Newsom or who exactly I would put that success onto, banning that pesticide. But I appreciate that it was just like an immediate ban, right? There wasn't any sort of phasing in of the ban. It just sort of like happened.
Right. I believe the ban, it took place starting February of this year. They initially announced that it would be banned in 2019.
Yeah.
And so as of February, companies are not allowed to manufacture that pesticide in California, and it's no longer allowed to be sold or used either.
That's incredible. Because I also read this article that said the Obama administration was proposing or initiating this ban, but I don't get why it didn't happen. I mean, it seems like, in my opinion, like that seems like a very neoliberal like thing, is that they'll propose it, but they won't quite get there. But I appreciate that California actually went all the way in and did it.
Right, and the other thing too is that like the pesticides have the pesticide companies put a lot of money into lobbying. Like there's people who represent them, and they say like, look, without us, you can't produce enough food to feed the country, for example. Like they'll use statistics like, oh, application of this pesticide protected this amount of plants and like allows farmers to grow bigger yields. And so they will say things like that. And yeah, like the big chemical companies that make these pesticides will basically use their money and influence to keep their interests represented in politics. So I think that might have to do with it as well.
Yeah. So Does Trump even believe in climate change? Does his administration, like, what do you think is going on? Is it all for profit, pretty much?
Yeah, I do think so. It's, I mean, it's hard for me to even think that like people just straight up don't believe in climate change. I think it's like a self-serving belief.
Hmm.
I mean, people like I know that there's people that that choose not to listen to science
Right.
for whatever reasons, but I think ultimately it's just self-serving to deny climate change.
Hmm.
Like think of the people who deny it. It's people who are involved in oil, for example. Like they have a big stake in like the fossil fuel industry and the way that emissions currently are.
Hmm.
And so again, these, like with the pesticide companies, big oil has so much influence in our politics. It's all just really entangled. And so, yeah, unfortunately, Trump has had, like, honestly, like I was talking earlier about how the 70s was, you know, the time that the environmental laws were first starting to be established.
Hmm.
Since like up from the establishment of that up until now, we've never seen such a big change in our environmental laws until today with Trump. There was a New York Times article that lists off 100 different environmental regulations where he's either reversed them already or is in the process of reversing them, which is crazy. But looking at the breakdown of the list, most of those regulations that he's reversed are related to either like oil and drilling or air pollution. And like policies like that, it doesn't really help anyone, obviously. Like really the only people that helps is like the elites and like the people who are like really involved in the oil industry and
Yeah.
making money off of it.
And the ones that are probably going to die in the next 20 years. I mean, I think even if you're a young person who's in the elite, you've got to at least be a little bit nervous about what's going to happen the next 50 years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because like, do you know about the estimates or the predictions for climate change in the next 50 or 60 years? Like what?
Well, I know on some levels. So I live in Sacramento, and I was actually just reading recently in the Sacramento Bee, talking about climate change and like increasing frequency of like the high of higher temperatures. In the year 2000, there was an average of only 5 days that were over 100 in Sacramento, which is crazy to me because I feel like I just experienced like 10 of those days in a row. Well, I know that there's also like a major heat event that we're still in the middle of right now, which kind of affects that. But it went on to say that by the year 2036, there will be, I think, like in the 30s of like so more than 6 times the number of 100-degree days plus in Sacramento. And then by the year 2060, I think it's 2060, there will be over 60 days that are over 100. So it's just crazy because, I mean, like only 15 years from now, it's projected that there's going to be 6 times the number of over 100-degree days in Sacramento. I know that Sacramento, because of its position in the valley, a lot of heat naturally goes there anyway. But like climatology isn't really my specialty, but it's definitely projected to play a huge role. Already climates are changing all over the world, really. Like I'm going to give a quick shout out to another one of your videos with Ilan Avenary talking about the Safe Third Country Agreement in Guatemala. I thought that was a really great video and I learned a lot from that. But one of the things that that video highlights is how climate change is currently affecting Guatemala and making really the whole like Central American region increasingly unlivable. And unfortunately, so there's like climate change is it's happening, but it's not going to be even across the whole world, like where it gets affected. In general, the closer you are to the equator, there's going to be more impacts. And then it's almost ironic because countries like the United States, who produce some of the biggest emissions, just because of like our placement on the world, are not going to be affected as much by climate change as other countries. But definitely in the next couple of decades, we're going to see it being more and more of a problem. And honestly, in my mind, it's already a bigger problem, or is more apparent than like when we were kids. Like how every year now the fire season is crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't remember like when we were kids, like every August there being like smoke in the air and like really bad air quality and so many people having to be evacuated.
Is this your endorsement of Biden as well? Because I know he's going to focus a bit more on the climate issue. Do you think that he would adequately respond to this crisis?
I mean, it's hard to say. I'm not endorsing Biden in that response. I mean, like I know that like the issue is especially bad with Donald Trump's environmental policies, but the thing is that even before Trump, like the general like policies that the U.S. had, like wasn't really doing enough to really address the issue of climate change. And so, I mean, I know that Bernie Sanders had a really good plan for like a Green New Deal. Honestly, I haven't done enough research on Joe Biden to really know. But I mean, if he's following in the footsteps of other like establishment Democrats, I wouldn't really expect like a climate like revolution per se if he went into office.
Yeah, it's frustrating how the establishment Democrats constantly are trying to undermine, especially progressives. That, like, even the writer of the Green New Deal, Ed Markey, he's running for Senate again, right, for his reelection, and Joe Kennedy is running against him and is not for the Green New Deal. And Nancy Pelosi just endorsed Joe Kennedy today. And it's like, come on, really? I thought we weren't supposed to run against incumbents. And this incumbent is progressive, so that's probably the reason why she's doing that.
That
Yeah,
is really frustrating.
it is frustrating. And I think speaking to Alana Veneris, he's also a friend from high school. But that video is great. He talks a lot about just Guatemalans and how they're already fleeing from these conditions. I mean, there's already like food insecurity, crops are drying up. It's just not the same as it used to be. And so a lot of it is either flight or death, right? So, and then they come up here to the US and then we turn them away. So where do they have to go? I mean, I think what's sad is a lot of them are, well, I guess they're all indigenous, their background is indigenous. And then that anti-immigrant stance becomes sort of anti-indigenous. And it's sort of like, to me, the racism and like the unfairness and injustice of it all is right there, is blatantly obvious.
I agree.
Yeah, but I feel like there's people that it's like not seeing color. They just see the law, but the law is unjust. And so I think environmental racism is an extremely important issue. And like you said, a lot of the people at the equator, almost entirely, right, are people of color. And so they'll be affected first by this. I mean, we also have West Africa, Northern Africa, a lot of immigrants coming from there as well to Europe. And you see a surge of anti-immigrant sentiment there too. It's just insane that we can't sit down and think of some sort of solution to this. I mean, there are people that are thinking of solutions. It's just the people in power don't even want to consider a lot of this stuff. Even Democrats here. It's just frustrating. And I wanted to get into the the guy from Brazil, Bolsonaro. What he's been up to. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that guy? He's nuts.
Yeah. He's been referred to as the Trump of the tropics, which I think is pretty funny. but basically, like I'm thinking of like the California wildfires as being like concurrent with the wildfires going on in Brazil too. The deforestation has been alarming since Bolsonaro took office. And the fires in the Amazon, they are man-made. It's because it's basically the cheapest way to clear land so that it can be used for agriculture mainly. But yeah, when he was running for office, that he promised that he said he was going to open up the Amazon to mining, to agriculture, and to other industries. And last year, it was 2 million acres, I think over 2 million acres of the Amazon rainforest burned. And this year, it's projecting to be even worse. So, and I think also like with Trump for Brazil's version of the EPA, it's called IBAMA.
Yeah.
I don't know the Portuguese name for the full agency, but I know that he's also changed key staff there and put people who he's closer with, and I know that enforcement of regulations has gone down a lot. Like the number of costs for fines has decreased a lot. And it's unfortunate because I was reading about how IBAMA curbed deforestation by I think 80% between like 2002 and 2015, I want to say.
Right.
And so it's unfortunate that that it's like that work has
been undermined, basically, right? I mean,
exactly, undermined is the word I was looking for.
yeah, because Bolsonaro wants to tear down IBAMA, Trump wants to tear down Obama, and it seems like they both have this like pettiness to them, like this brainless pettiness. Because I was reading about Bolsonaro, right? He wanted to go fishing in this reserve, and basically these IBAMA agents fined him for it and wouldn't allow him to do it. This was back when he was just I don't think they have a senator, but he was like a legislator, right? So he was trying to put in place a law to keep IBAMA agents from carrying guns. Now, I'm sure it's important for them to carry guns for safety reasons, because I know there's just a lot of violence in the region, especially if you're trying to assert a certain law. And I think environmental regulations are incredibly important. But he ended up, when he became president of Brazil, he ended up firing that agent who gave him the fine like years ago. And it's like, it's insane.
How funny. That.
Yeah,
that is petty.
Yeah, it's extremely petty and brainless. I know he also denied $20 million. I think it was $20 million to fight the fires in the rainforest. And Macron, right. Yeah, Macron was trying to push it onto him. And I guess they got into a spat. And then Bolsonaro said he wouldn't accept the funds unless Macron apologized to him. And it's like, dude, what? What's wrong with you, man? It just seems so childish.
Right. That is just like petty and, just like on a basis of personal differences rather than, doing what like the government is supposed to do and what environmental protection agencies are supposed to do.
Yeah, and even the place that he was fishing at, I forget the name of it, but he wants to turn it into a tourist attraction now. And it reminds me of just like Cusco, like Emperor's New Groove, like really like wanting to, just like it's all about him. And I think it goes along with Trump as well, and just a ton of our leaders these days. I mean, it's really frustrating that it's mostly like Western nations and then Bolsonaro and other leaders, but it's this sort of like, I think it's like right-wing populism and nationalism that,
definitely.
Yeah, and that completely destroys the lives of the working class, and especially poor farmers like in Guatemala or in South and Central America. I mean, what do we do, Mason? What do we do about all this stuff?
Gosh, well, to start, I think that and I mean, not just the United States, but on a global level, we need leaders who really take the important things seriously, like really take climate change seriously and are willing to really do like the proper planning to make sure that this planet will continue to be habitable for people and for all life forms. And also to keep equity in mind too, because I mean, like you said, like it's like these people in power just do things that are self-serving when I mean, like you said, like the everyday person just gets let down. Like the people, like laboring and working for the farms. Yeah, it's just unfortunate, but I think that it can start from people, you know, like everyday citizens. I mean, we need to, I mean, vote, of course, but I mean, I feel like that's like, you know, it's a start, but it's not everything that needs to happen. There needs to be, I think, big structural changes. And honestly, I think that a lot of like the environmental degradation that, you know, harms not only the environment, but like the most marginalized communities due to environmental racism is capitalism, essentially. I think the root of a lot of problems, because like companies wish to just have no restraint with like extracting and using up resources. And it's like everything is just, they're trying to accomplish their goals with the lowest cost.
Right. I think the George Floyd protests are only a precursor, and I think the environment is going to be one of the big issues. I mean, if we get those George Floyd protest levels again throughout the world, I think we really could do something huge. I mean, it's difficult because the right wing continues to stock up on military and everything, but there has to be something. Yeah, there has to be a way to stop this, or else, you know, climate change will become irreversible. So
right,
we all have
time to dilly-dally.
Yeah, that's my frustration with Democrats in general, is that there's a lot of dilly-dallying. They don't see the obvious need. And it's funny because Biden says that Trump doesn't listen to the scientists when it comes to coronavirus, which is true, very true. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't listen to the scientists enough when he writes up his environmental policies. So it's a bit of a contradiction because of how important this issue is. Anyways,
definitely.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on, Mason.
Yeah, no problem.
I appreciate you. I respect everything you're doing, and yeah, let's talk more.
Okay, yeah, I'd really love to.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor being on here. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Take care.